I'm feeling festive today because it's the dumbest time of the year. The worst holiday that we celebrate, Halloween, is right around the corner. And today I'm going to answer the question, should Christians celebrate Halloween? Now, before you think you know the answer to that question, trust me, you're going to want to stick around because we're going to be talking about that and more today on Indie Thinker. Today's show is sponsored by our friends over at Element Home Loans, and the Kevin Blair team at Element Home Loans can help you today secure your family's financial future. Typically, I don't say that many F words in one show, but I just did to try to help you understand that, the economy right now is a dumpster fire on top of a dumpster fire filled with garbage and then lit on fire. Joe Biden's economy is the worst, and interest rates are higher now than they were a year ago. But if you're renting and you haven't secured your family's future by getting into a home, then all you're doing is paying 100% interest rather than 7% interest. And you can always refinance when interest rates go down. So what are you waiting for? You need to go get pre-approved right now for a home loan by going to kevinblairteam.com. The folks over at Element Home Loans and the Kevin Blair team can help you not only get pre-approved, but there's no gimmicks, no lies, no trying to trick you into getting pre-approved for a loan so that you'll just have to use these people and get so exhausted because you've already given a mountain of information to a group of people and you guess you just better use them regardless of the customer service. No, you're not going to get trapped with the Kevin Blair team because you're going to get first-rate customer service from a team that actually cares about you and cares about the things that you care about. So go to kevinblairteam.com today, and when you do so, let them know that Indie Thinker sent you. Welcome to the show. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. By now, you have probably seen this viral clip of a couple of daycare workers wearing Halloween masks and scaring very, very small children about the age of around 2 years old. If you haven't, I'll throw it up on the screen for you to watch it now. All right, so as you can see, a very unhealthy-looking woman is chasing children around in a Halloween mask until they're screaming and crying. Okay, there she was talking to a little boy and saying, are you going to be good? Do I need to take you outside? And then screams in his face. It's lunchtime, and all of these children are screaming and crying and covering their face because of this person. All right, so as you can tell, just based upon that clip, you feel like perhaps the elitist in blue states aren't too wrong about southern states. These teachers in Mississippi are stupid, naive, evil, perhaps even, to do this, to terrorize children like this. But I'm not positive, and maybe this is going to get me in trouble. I'm not positive that what they did here was criminal, and these teachers have been charged. I'm not sure with what, but they've been charged with something and arrested based upon what they did here. Now, fired, yes, and of course, if I was a parent in that situation, I don't know what I would do. But all I can say is that it sure seems to be way less traumatic and way less a version of child abuse than what is happening in elementary schools around America. I mean, we're subjecting kids to pornographic material and trying to shove sexual orientation and gender ideology down the throats of small children. That's way more damaging to kids than what we just saw on this video. And what we just saw is just a clear case of unbridled stupidity, which is very common in Mississippi. And by the way, I'm just joking, guys. I'm from the panhandle of Florida. I've got nothing to say about it. Just a joke. But it is very stupid. And this is my general sentiment about Halloween altogether. It is a dumb holiday. It is a dumb holiday in that we glamorize grotesque things like murder and blood and guts. And maybe even more troubling, we love to manipulate the very real and very traumatic sensation of fear, which I think we should do with a little bit of trembling. I think this is a situation, perhaps messing with our fears is the situation where you might say that old cliche, like we run where angels fear to tread. So needless to say, my general idea about Halloween is just that it's a very dumb holiday, and maybe one not totally worth celebrating. But that said, push aside the grotesque nature of the slasher movies and the ideas of manipulating fears and preying upon people's fears, and Push aside some of the ridiculous things about Halloween, and you get to the simplicity of Halloween, which for my family is small children wearing Spider-Man costumes, little plastic yellow pumpkins, getting and well, let's face it, stealing candy from their neighbors who are gullible enough to give it to them just because they look precious and cute. And I am all for stealing things from people that are gullible enough to give it to you. With all that being said, as dumb as I think Halloween is, I think it might surprise you to hear me say that I think Christians should be okay with celebrating Halloween. Push aside kind of the grotesque nature of the slasher films, the blood and guts, the haunted houses that prey upon the very real emotion of fear, which I think is something we shouldn't mess with. Push that all aside, and ultimately you have two small, at least in my case, beautiful children, thanks to my wife, in cute costumes with a plastic pumpkin, getting candy from their neighbors who are gullible enough to give it to them for free. Maybe the gullible person here is me, because I spent like $30 on a costume from Amazon, and we just get like $5 worth of candy free from strangers. But nonetheless, if you really look at the common celebration of Halloween in most households, it doesn't have any of the encumbrances that we often associate with Halloween, and Christians get this wrong a lot. They want to try to strap Halloween down with all of this demonic overtones and all of these demonic features that actually don't even take place in the households of Christians when it comes to actually celebrating Halloween. All you have is a day where kids get to have fun, dress up, and play. And if that's all it is, then I say, yeah, celebrate. But to get the argument in its fullest and to get why I think we should be okay with celebrating Halloween, let's go to our next segment, Christianity Not Today. To start off, Christianity Not Today is where I take a secular event or a secular idea and try to put a Christian perspective on it and think about it from that critical way. Now, for those of you who are Christians, that's great. For those of you who are non-Christians, I think this is vitally important for you to open your mind to new ideas and to certain perspectives that we often don't hear in the mainstream. And that's what I hope to provide here. And certainly towards the end of this podcast, I'll try to tell you why I think this is relevant to each and every one of us. But we're first going to, not ironically, I don't think, go to a CBN clip. And of course, that's Christian Broadcast News. And we're going to hear what I think is a patently unchristian take on Halloween. So I'm just going to critique it just slightly, and then we'll move on to kind of a more substantive look at what Halloween actually is so that we can understand it more fully if we're going to come up with an understanding about it. But here is this CBN clip from a present pastor who used to be a Satan worshiper who tells you that it is a bad idea for you to celebrate Halloween.
Well, should Christians celebrate Halloween? Some believe it can be taken back like other holidays. But a former Satanist who is now a pastor says no.
Real quick, I want to stop and answer that question. Should Christians take back holidays? In a moment, I'm going to get into the historical roots of Halloween and show you how Christians actually did do that with Halloween and why I think it's important to realize that. But the answer to that question, should Christians hijack holidays and make it their own? Absolutely, 100% we should. By the way, we did that with Christmas, and that's why today Christmas is celebrated in the West and all over the world. So you get to open presents on Christmas Day, and yes, you're welcome for that. That's because Christians are unapologetically hijacking secular culture and then Christianizing it as much as possible. That's what we're called to do. We are here to take your silly holidays and redeem them and actually make them worthwhile. And so you're the benefactor of that. Especially when it comes to Christmas. Now, Valentine's Day, where you have to go buy expensive candy, expensive roses, and then take your wife out to a very expensive meal, that's not on us. But certain holidays, even like Halloween, there's some spiritual significance to these things, and there's even a benefit to celebrating them. By the way, I'm just joking about Valentine's Day, honey. I absolutely love every second of it. Nonetheless, so the answer to the question is yes, Christians should hijack, and we are great at stealing stuff and actually repackaging it and making it useful. So you're welcome for that, society. So let's jump into what the pastor actually has to say about Halloween.
Knowing what you came from and what you used to do, you're pretty discouraged that you see Christians celebrating Halloween. Why?
I don't know how you can cheat on God. I don't know how you can cheat on the Lord Jesus Christ, because
how you cheat on God. Listen. We're going to go into this a little bit further, but cheating on God does not mean dressing your kid up in a Spider-Man costume. Like, how is that cheating on God? This is, I know the argument that's about to be made, and I'm like wanting to jump into it, but suffice to say, if that's all you're doing, that clearly cannot be considered cheating on God. And maybe just one more argument. If my kid dressed up on November 2nd, let's say, and dressed up like Spider-Man, and went door to door to show everybody how cool he looked, obviously with his dad, would that be satanic? Is it just because it's on this particular day that all of a sudden you're betraying God? Does that even make any sense? I think the answer obviously to that is no.
I don't see Satan as coming on Good Friday and coming and hanging out with us, right? You know, I got married on Halloween and had a demonic wedding.
Okay, so valid point here, right? So Satan worshipers aren't trying to steal Easter from Christians, so why are we trying to steal Halloween from the Satanists? Well, that would be to suppose that Halloween is a Satanist holiday, which it isn't. We'll get to the history here in just a moment. But again, I'll just go ahead and say this, that I am absolutely okay with stealing things from people who don't deserve it and using it for redemptive purposes, okay? So call me the Robin Hood of the Christian world.
Why would you put your kids, your family, why would you put your purpose, your destiny, why would you put your whole eternity in a demonic altar?
Well, people say it's just fun, candy, kids are having costumes on.
Well,
but you said it's much more.
The candy, you know, I never shared this before, but this candy, people from different walks of life pray over these candies. Witchcraft, they pray over the candies. You knock on people's door, you don't know the person that you knock on door, she's a witch. Okay, you don't know she's a witch, she's doing Wicca, she's practicing New Age, and you knock on her door and you coming in legal rights of this witch or this wall, or this person's practicing this stuff, giving you this kind of candy. Mm-hmm. Now you taking that stuff home, you put that stuff into your body.
Now, I have just a quick question about this. Is that an actually convincing statement to you? That perhaps your neighbors are actually really witches and Satan worshipers and they're praying over the candy, and by eating the candy, that's how... Like, listen, I watched the movie as a kid, unfortunately, Damien. I did not know that that's how you are artificially inseminated with the devil, through Halloween candy, but apparently that's a thing. So, obviously, I think this is a little bit overreaching. But by the way, I see this a lot. I'm not picking here on this individual man, this pastor, God bless him. But I see this a lot. When you clearly don't have an argument, you go to the wildest extreme fringe argument that you possibly can. This happens so much on social media. So suffice to say, what if you do know all your neighbors, and what if you're pretty sure none of them are witches? Does that mean that getting candy then is okay? And then if so, like, have at it, right? Then it's not a satanic holiday, but we have to try to force Satanism into Halloween to make it evil. So more of that.
Mm-hmm. Amen. And on top of that, Anton LaVey said, out of his mouth, you know, he was the ruler of the Church of Satan, right? Out of his mouth, he said, I want to thank every Christian parent for allowing their child to celebrate Halloween one time a year, the devil's holiday.
All right, so the only thing I have to say about that is I want to go on the record officially as saying I don't care what Anton LaVey says, ever. And I don't take it seriously. So Anton LaVey, of course, is the leader of the Satanic Church, or at least was. And he says, Anton LaVey thanks Christian parents every single year for giving them a primer on Satanism, and thanks them for celebrating Halloween every year, because obviously your celebration of Halloween every year is the thing that's going to indoctrinate them and lead them towards Satanism. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think I have ever seen a satanic festival or seen anything online that kind of describes what those look like, where they're sacrificing a Vestal Virgin or sacrificing a goat on the altar, where you see a little boy dressed like Spider-Man walking around carrying his orange plastic pumpkin. The reason for that is that if you push aside the haunted houses and push aside the slasher flicks and all of the ridiculous stuff, the dumb stuff about Halloween, and just get into kind of the make-believe, the dress-up, and the gathering of candy, and just make that your Halloween celebration, then you're not actually creating a primer for Satanism in any shape, form, or fashion. There's no way to actually look at it like that. And by the way, kind of as an aside, whatever Anton LaVey says, I don't care. I've never respected anything he says. I don't view him as an authority on anything. And this is why we need to kind of go to other sources beyond just kind of the typical Christian resources or Anton Levine himself, and actually dig into the history of Halloween so that we can actually understand where it really comes from. And most people believe that Halloween is descended from a Celtic harvest festival called Samhain. And it's a time of recognizing the scarceness of harvest because winter's coming, and perhaps even recognizing that the calendar now, which was back in those days separated between light and dark times, or in other words, summer and winter, that now the days are going to be shorter, the nights are going to be longer, and the weather is going to be a little bit colder. And this celebration was always associated with reflecting on the dead because winter was a time of deadness. So many cultures, not just the Celts, celebrated the dead. They did this mostly with noble intent, just remembering their ancestors, remembering those who have passed on. You think about Dia de Muerte and other things. And I know that there's a lot of things associated with that, but I'm just simply talking about the idea of celebrating those who have passed on. Now, I want to say something about that. We do this at funerals without any kind of baggage of considering it Satanism, but it's not necessarily Christian other than in a historical way to bring a bunch of people together, look at a casket, say things about this person's life, and reflect upon mortality. That's not anything we see in the Bible, per se. We see funerals, we see burial plots and all that kind of thing, but the celebration, the tradition of these funerals is not clearly dictated in Scripture. But I do believe that it's a beneficial practice, actually, to reflect upon our own mortality, to think about our lives, to think about how finite they are, to think that they are but a mist, and then to think about those who have gone on before us. And because of that, and probably more things, when Christians finally conquered the Romans, and the Romans started, well, I say conquered, but when Christianity became the major religion of the Roman Empire, and Romans started conquering other portions of the world, these kind of popular festivals were then hijacked by these Christian Romans, and this Samhain festival is one of those things. It was celebrated on May 13th, and it celebrated the dead, and they did things like they would put a cake and some milk at grave sites, which I just think is the worst waste of cake and milk ever. If you're going to do that, in fact, I'd like to create a celebration where cake and milk is given to me on a regular basis beyond my birthday. But nonetheless, the Romans thought that this prolific holiday that was so widely and popularly celebrated would be something that some of these cultures would kick back against, and because it was so popular, they wanted to leverage that popularity, and they made it their own. And so the Christians that invaded the Celts took this holiday, and in 609 they kind of purposed the holiday of Lumeria or Samhain, and they made it their own, and they called it All Saints' Day, and they actually celebrated it on November 1st. And All Saints' Day was simply just a day where people celebrated the saints of the church. They celebrated those ones who have died and gone on, but were heroes of the faith. So as you can tell, a very kind of noble celebration, a very powerful way to remember heroes of the faith. And presently, at least in my context, in Protestant churches and evangelical churches, we don't do this. We don't really look back to the martyrs of the church and celebrate the work that they've done, the way that they stood up for their faith. So I think this actually is one really cool kind of holiday. Well, as you might be able to guess, All Saints' Day became so popular and so widely celebrated in the early Christian church that they even decided to expand it beyond just that one day, and the day before was called All Saints' Day Eve or All Hallows Eve. And then eventually that would be shortened to Halloween, which was the day before celebrating the saints of the church. And with that history in mind, I want to make sure that you understand that Halloween is actually a very Christian idea. Now, of course, much like Christmas, it's been hijacked and it's been popularized and commercialized, and now it's a billion-dollar industry. That's to be expected. But the reason Halloween comes to us today is simply because of Christians. Now, a couple of statements, and then I'll kind of tell you why yes to the Halloween celebration thing. And so the first thought is this: Christianity has permeated society in ways that we do not recognize. I say this especially to my non-Christian friends out there watching this episode. You are a benefactor of Christianity in ways that you don't realize. And this brings to mind a comment that I just recently got on one of my podcast episodes from Daily News. This guy says Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, etc. all still persist in the present day, but they all can't be right. Well, my dear friend, you are correct. And they all are not the same. And so if you're actually going to have a conversation about these different religions of the world and which one is right and which one is wrong, then you might have to understand the differences between these major religions. And this is exactly what I replied to our friend here by just simply saying this. Because I make a habit of keeping an open mind to things that have been as deeply influential to the development of the science, arts, education, health, and so much more, unlike every example you've given, Christianity is a little more pesky. It has created the world you know, even if you're not aware of it. And this is a classic response. I love this. You should probably get to know your audience first before you make bold statements like your last. The reason I can make a bold statement like whether you like it or not, or are aware of it or not, Christianity has created the world you know. The reason I can make that bold statement and not know anything about Mr. Daily News here is because it is an objective fact. Christianity, the Bible, and Christian belief and Christian ethics have been influential in absolutely cultivating the West, and especially the American West. The Bible is the most quoted book by any of our early founders in any of our early documents in America. The Bible is the number one most quoted book among anything else. And so it's undeniable that Christianity has had a major influence in the world and has created the world as we know it. At vis-a-vis, the celebration of Halloween has only been passed down to you because of Christians. And this is my whole argument throughout. Christians hijacking culture is a good thing. Halloween is yet another reminder that when Christians hijack culture, create culture, and impact and influence culture, it's a powerful thing. The reason you're celebrating Halloween today is that Christians decided to do that hundreds of years ago. So when Christians influence culture, it makes an impact and it makes a difference and it makes the world that we know. And it touches people's lives even if they don't realize it. So I say hijack culture, hijack Halloween, make it as Christian as you possibly can. And that's where I come to my final point. Do we reclaim Halloween? Do we celebrate Halloween? I think yeah. Maybe you don't like the way it's presently celebrated, so maybe here's just a couple of pro tips. First, if you don't like the commercialization of Christmas or the commercialization of Halloween, but you think you may want to celebrate Halloween, then perhaps you could do this. And I'm going to do it with my family this year. You could take a version of our modern Halloween. Your kids can dress up. They can do that whole candy thing. But then you can also take time to reflect upon the saints of the church. Maybe read Fox's Book of the Martyrs or talk about a famous missionary who gave their life to serve others. Maybe you think of Eric Liddell, or you think of Jim Elliot, or David Livingston, the many myriad of people who have given their life to a great cause. I can't think of a better use of your time than on Halloween to allow your kids to have that fun, but then also to take a special moment to focus on those saints who have died. And you can reclaim a little bit of what Halloween really was in the first place. And that all comes because we open our mind to understand just a little bit of history, without which we take our ignorance and we replace it with mythology, and we accuse 5-year-olds of being demonic, which is clearly not what's taking place when they celebrate Halloween. Whatever the case may be, you can reclaim some of that territory. I, for one, don't give up territory and don't give back territory that I've taken and that the church has taken. So if you're a Christian, think about doing that. But regardless, Christian or not, you may not know this, but God created you on purpose and for a purpose. He created you to take secular society and redeem it, to make it better in some way, to leave this world a little bit better than the way you found it. So I urge you all, go out there, take secular society and redeem it. Make it better. Leave this world a little better off than you found it. And as long as you're willing to do that, then I think, hey, celebrate away. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully that was helpful to you. I'd love to hear your respectful comments down below. Don't forget to like and share and to go with God.